Oh, or such a saint. Sarah, my mom gushed, her voice practically dripping with pride. We don't know what we'd do without you. I sat there, my fork hovering over my plate, biting down the sting building at the back of my throat. Across the table, Sarah basked in the praise, her picture-perfect smile shining like a polished trophy. She didn't even glance at me. She didn't have to. She knew I wouldn't say anything. Like I couldn't say anything. My name is Julia Mitchell. I'm 27 years old and I'm an elementary school teacher. The dependable one. The fixer. The background character in my own family story. And Sarah? Sarah's the golden child. The star. The sun we were all expected to orbit around. For as long as I can remember. I've been the one quietly picking up the pieces. Paying bills when no one else could. Showing up when things fell apart. No applause. No acknowledgement. Just this suffocating expectation that I would keep doing it. Quietly. Invisibly. While Sarah soaked in the spotlight. For years, I told myself it was enough just to help. That love meant sacrifice. That someday, somehow, they'd see. But it never happened. And it was starting to eat me alive. The first real crack appeared one night in my tiny apartment. When I opened my banking app after paying rent and saw a balance so low it made my stomach twist into knots. I sat there, frozen, staring at the screen, realizing I couldn't afford groceries without dipping into my emergency fund again. Meanwhile, Sarah was posting pictures from her latest weekend getaway in Napa Valley. Something inside me snapped. There was no dramatic announcement. No cathartic screaming match. Just a quiet, stubborn decision. I stopped sending the money. At first, nothing happened. Weeks passed, and I waited for the inevitable explosion. But instead, there was silence. And for a brief, foolish moment, I wondered if maybe, 2014, just maybe, 2014 they had figured it out. Maybe they had finally seen Sarah for who she really was. Then the calls started. First it was my mom. Casual but probing. Julia, sweetheart, do you know if Sarah had any problems with her bank? A few payments are late, must be a mistake. Right? I kept my voice light. Maybe you should ask Sarah. Then came my dad, gruff and uncomfortable. Some overdue notices came in. He muttered, strange, right? Sarah's always been so responsible. Again, I shrugged it off. Talked to Sarah. Dad. It was a small, quiet rebellion. And God, it felt good. But the guilt clawed at me every night. Every worried tone in my parents' voices. Every anxious text. Even though I knew, 2014, I knew, 2014 it wasn't my responsibility anymore. That familiar sense of duty still gnawed at me. And just when I thought maybe I could endure it, the real test came. Mom called a family dinner. Said we needed to sort things out. That was code for, let's all pretend Sarah is perfect and Julia is the disappointment. I almost didn't go. Almost. But something in me needed to see how far they'd let the lie stretch. Dinner started predictably. Polite small talk. Forced smiles. Sarah giggling like she didn't have a care in the world. Then, Dad, 2014 stoic. Dependable Dad, 2014 put down his fork. Looked Sarah dead in the eye. And said, you've been handling this. Sarah, why are the payments falling behind? Sarah froze. Just for a heartbeat. A tiny flicker of panic crossed her face before she plastered on a weak smile. It's just some unexpected expenses, she said airily. Nothing major. NBUT. It was too late. The crack had spread. Mom jumped in immediately, her voice sharp and defensive. She's doing her best. Robert, maybe if Julia helped a little more, we wouldn't be in this situation. And there it was. The slap I should have seen coming. The injustice of it hit me so hard I had to grip the edge of the table to stay upright. I opened my mouth, closed it again. My heart was hammering so loudly it drowned out everything else. Then, finally, the words burst out. That's not true, I said, my voice shaking. I've been the one helping. For years. Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. Mom scoffed, shaking her head. Don't be ridiculous, Julia. Sarah's the one who's been sacrificing for us. You're just bitter. Across the table, Sarah wouldn't even look at me. She kept her eyes fixed on her plate. Her face carefully blank, like she didn't hear me. Like I wasn't even there. My hands trembled under the table. I wanted to scream, to throw the bank statements onto the table, To force them to see. But I didn't. I didn't because I realized, you 2014 right then. Right there, you 2014 it wouldn't matter. They didn't want the truth. They wanted the story they had always told themselves. Sarah. The saint. Julia. The disappointment. I swallowed hard, forcing down the bitterness clawing up my throat. I have receipts, I said quietly. 3 years' worth. Every payment. Every wire transfer. Sarah finally looked up then. Her eyes wide. Her face flushed. She opened her mouth, ready to spin, ready to twist it all into another lie. But I stood up. I pushed back my chair, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. And I stood tall for the first time in my life. I'm done, I said simply. And I walked away. I left them sitting there in their comfortable lies. Their chosen delusions. For once, I chose myself. It's strange how quiet the world feels after you choose yourself for the first time. You expect fireworks, thunder, some grand cinematic moment, but instead, it's just silence. A heavy, almost uncomfortable silence that settles into your bones and makes you question if you did the right thing. The night after that dinner, I sat on the floor of my tiny apartment, knees pulled up to my chest, replaying everything in my head. The look on my mother's face, Sarah's cold indifference, my father's silence. I told myself I shouldn't care. I told myself it didn't matter anymore. But it did. God, it did. Because even after standing up for myself, there was still this ugly ache lodged deep in my chest. Years of loyalty, love, and sacrifice, and they had tossed it aside like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. Days turned into weeks. The phone calls from home slowed to a trickle, then stopped altogether. I figured maybe they were giving me space. Or maybe they were just too busy pretending none of it happened. Either way, I wasn't going to be the one to reach out first. I focused on my job, on my students, on my tiny slice of a life that didn't involve cleaning up after other people's messes. For a while, it even felt good, freeing, like I was finally breathing air I didn't have to fight for. But of course, it couldn't last. One Saturday afternoon, just as I was grading a stack of math tests, my phone rang. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I stared at it, heart hammering in my chest, debating whether or not to answer. I picked up on the fourth ring. Julia, she said, her voice tight, controlled. We need to talk. The words sent a shiver down my spine. I agreed to meet them for coffee the next day. Neutral ground, public space, somewhere they couldn't yell or accuse without causing a scene. I told myself I was ready, that I wouldn't let them twist things again. But the moment I walked into that cafe and saw the look on my mother's face, the tight-lipped disappointment, the simmering anger barely hidden beneath her polite smile, I knew exactly how this was going to go. She didn't waste time. You humiliated Sarah, Mom said, setting her latte down with a sharp clink. You embarrassed this family. I blinked, stunned. I told the truth. You made her look like a liar in front of everyone. She snapped. You made us look like fools. I laughed, bitter and hollow. I didn't have to make her look like anything. Mom, she did that all on her own. Beside her, Dad shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. As usual, Sarah wasn't there. Of course she wasn't. Mom leaned in closer, her eyes narrowing. You've always been jealous of Sarah. Always. We see that now. The accusation sliced through me, sharp and deep. I gripped the edge of the table to keep from shaking. You think this is about jealousy? I said, my voice low. After everything I've done for you? After all the money I sent? The sacrifices I made? Mom's lips thinned into a harsh line. You didn't do it out of love. You did it to hold it over us. It felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Conversations around us paused. Heads turned. Good. Let them see. Let them hear. I did it because I loved you. I said, my voice trembling but loud enough to carry. I did it because I thought family meant something. But I see now, it only meant something when it was convenient for you. Mom's face flushed red with fury. But I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked out, leaving them staring after me. Twist the knife, I thought grimly. Twist it deep. The days that followed were a blur of emotions. Rage, sadness, relief. But mostly this strange, aching emptiness, like mourning a death that no one else acknowledged. It was during that haze that another twist found its way to me. Scrolling through Instagram late one night. Unable to sleep, I stumbled upon a photo Sarah had posted. There she was, grinning ear to ear, clutching a shiny new set of car keys in front of a luxury SUV. Hard work pays off, the caption read, littered with sparkle emojis. My stomach churned with nausea and anger. Hard work? She hadn't paid a single hospital bill in years. She hadn't made a single sacrifice. And now she was flaunting a car that probably cost more than I made in a year? The comments under the post made it worse. You're such an inspiration, Sarah. You're killing it, girl. Proud of you, queen. It wasn't just my family who believed the lie. It was everyone. And that's when I realized, Sarah wasn't just living in her fantasy. She was building an entire kingdom out of it. The next day, my phone rang again. It was my dad. Your mother isn't doing well, he said, his voice gruff. She's stressed about the bills. About the payments. I almost laughed. The absurdity of it all. Maybe Sarah can help, I said sweetly. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. She's trying, he said finally, but even he didn't sound convinced. Trying, right. Another Sunday dinner was scheduled. Another attempt at a family meeting to work things out. And even though every fiber of my being screamed to stay away, part of me knew I had to go. Not for them. For me. To finish what I started. The night of the dinner. I stood in front of the mirror. Staring at my reflection, I saw the same face I always had, plain. Dependable Julia, but there was something different in my eyes now. A hardness. A clarity. I wasn't the same girl who sat silently at that table months ago. And this time? I wasn't going to let them rewrite the story. Not again. The night of the dinner felt different from the start. Maybe it was the heavy way the clouds sagged in the sky. Or the way my hands trembled just slightly as I locked my apartment door. Either way, I knew before I even pulled out of the driveway that something was coming. Something big. When I walked into my parents' house, the atmosphere was thick enough to choke on. Mom was bustling around the kitchen, her movements sharp and agitated. Dad sat stiffly in his armchair, thumbing through the same newspaper he'd been pretending to read for the past 20 years. And Sarah? Sarah was perched on the couch like a queen on her throne, sipping a glass of wine, looking for all the world like she didn't have a single care. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, my heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. Julia, Mom said, her voice clipped. Sit down. I sat. No hugs, no smiles, just cold, hard expectation. For a moment, no one spoke. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, filling the silence. I waited, feeling like a soldier stepping onto a battlefield I hadn't signed up for. Then Sarah set her wine glass down with a little clink and leaned forward, her eyes glittering. We need to clear the air, she said, her voice syrupy sweet. I almost laughed. Clear the air? That was rich coming from the girl who'd been breathing lies for years. I think, Sarah continued, flashing her best innocent smile. There's been some misunderstandings, some hurt feelings. I raised an eyebrow. You mean you stealing credit for everything I did? That misunderstanding? Mom flinched like I'd slapped her. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Sarah's smile tightened. Just a hair. Julia, Mom said sharply, her voice brimming with warning. This isn't the time to be petty. Petty. God, they really didn't get it. They never would. I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms across my chest. Fine, I said, let's hear it. Sarah launched into a carefully rehearsed speech about how family meant forgiveness. About how she had always intended to help more, but life had gotten in the way. How she was sorry if anyone felt hurt. She painted herself as the overburdened daughter, struggling silently under the weight of expectations. And my parents lapped it up like thirsty dogs. I felt something inside me snap. I have the bank statements, I said quietly, pulling out a manila folder from my bag and laying it on the table. 3 years' worth, every payment, every transfer, all under my name. The color drained from Sarah's face. Mom stared at the folder like it was a live grenade. Julia, put that away, she said, her voice shaking. No, I said, my voice steady. You wanted to clear the air. Let's clear it. Sarah reached for the folder, but I pulled it back. Not yet, I said. First, I want to hear it from her. I turned, locking eyes with Sarah. Tell them, Sarah, I said softly. Tell them the truth. Her jaw clenched. Her eyes darted toward Mom. Then Dad, desperate for backup. Julia's just trying to make me look bad, she said, her voice rising. She's bitter because I'm the one they're proud of. I laughed. A cold, brittle sound. You think this is about pride? I said. I've spent years sacrificing everything for this family while you paraded around like the hero. And now you're standing here, still trying to spin it like I'm the villain? Sarah stood up, her face flushed with anger. You could have said something earlier. She snapped. You could have spoken up years ago. But you didn't. You chose to stay silent. The room fell deathly silent. And there it was. The accidental confession. I looked at my parents. Saw the flicker of confusion cross their faces. Saw the seeds of doubt finally begin to sprout. You knew, I said, my voice low. You knew you were taking credit for my sacrifices. And you let it happen. Sarah's mouth opened and closed. But no sound came out. Mom looked between us, her face pale. Sarah, is that true? Sarah shook her head violently. No, I mean, not really. It's complicated. Complicated, right. I stood up, gathering my things. I don't think it's complicated at all. I said, you lied. You let me bleed for this family while you collected the applause. And now that the truth's on the table, you're still trying to spin it. Mom reached out, her hand trembling. Julia, wait. I stepped back, out of her reach. I'm done, I said, my voice steady. I won't keep setting myself on fire to keep you all warm. And with that, I turned and walked out. Twist. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. Sarah's car has been repossessed. Thought you'd want to know. I stared at the screen, my heart thudding. Maybe the universe did have a sense of justice after all. I slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled away without looking back. This time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was liberating. And I knew, you 2014 deep down. Bone deep, you 2014 that this was just the beginning. The weeks after that dinner were oddly quiet. Like the uneasy calm after a massive storm tears through and leaves everything splintered in its wake. I half expected another barrage of texts. Frantic calls, guilt-laced messages from my mother. But nothing came. Not from her. Not from Dad. Not even from Sarah. It should have felt peaceful. Liberating. But instead, there was this weird, hollow ache inside me. Not regret. Not guilt. Just a lingering sadness that even after the truth was laid bare, they would rather stay silent than face it. Meanwhile, life outside my broken family moved on. At school, my students filled my days with chaotic laughter, messy art projects, and spelling quizzes scrawled in barely legible handwriting. I poured myself into my work, my friends, anything that reminded me that I wasn't just the background character in someone else's drama. And still, in the quiet moments, I thought about them, about how easily they had chosen Sarah's lies over my loyalty, about how deeply the betrayal ran. Then, late one Thursday evening, as rain drizzled against my apartment windows, there was a knock at my door. I froze. Nobody ever just showed up at my place. Unannounced. Not anymore. When I opened the door, Sarah stood there, dripping wet, mascara smudged beneath her eyes, her arms hugging herself like she was trying to hold her body together. "Can we talk?" she whispered. Every instinct in me screamed to slam the door shut. But curiosity, morbid, dangerous curiosity, made me step aside and let her in. She hovered awkwardly just inside the door, dripping puddles onto my floor. I'm in trouble," she said, her voice cracking. I said nothing, just crossed my arms and waited. "My car," she stammered. "They took it, and I'm behind on rent. And Mom and Dad, they won't help me." For a second, I almost laughed. The irony was so sharp it could have sliced skin. "They believed you," I said quietly. "They chose you. And now what? You expect me to save you?" Tears welled up in her eyes. Real ones. Maybe. Or maybe just another performance. "I know I messed up," she said, her voice trembling. "I know I was wrong. Please, Julia, I don't have anyone else." There it was. The twist I hadn't even realized I'd been waiting for. Sarah Mitchell, the golden girl, standing in my doorway, soaked to the bone, begging. But the thing about bridges is once they're burned, Sometimes there's no rebuilding them. I let her stand there for a long, uncomfortable moment. You know what you need to do, I said finally. Tell Mom and Dad the truth. Not just at a family dinner. Publicly. Let everyone know. Her face twisted with horror. I can't, she whispered. It would destroy them. I shrugged. That's not my problem anymore. She cried then. Really cried. Ugly, heaving sobs that echoed in my tiny apartment. And maybe once upon a time, I would have caved. Maybe once, I would have wrapped my arms around her. Whispered that it would all be okay. But not anymore. I'm not your safety net, I said, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. You made your bed, Sarah, now you get to lie in it. She wiped her face with trembling hands. Please, Julia, just alone, just until I get back on my feet. I tilted my head slightly, studying her. You want alone? I asked. Fine, here's my condition. You stand in front of the entire family at the reunion next month. You tell them everything, no excuses, no half-truths, full confession. Sarah paled. That would ruin everything. I shrugged again. Your choice. She stood there, silent, the clock ticking loudly in the background. Finally, she nodded. Okay, she whispered. I'll do it. I didn't smile, didn't soften. I just stepped aside and let her walk back out into the rain. As the door clicked shut behind her, a strange calm settled over me. Because deep down, I already knew something she didn't. She wasn't going to do it. And I wasn't going to save her. Not this time. The day of the family reunion dawned hot and sticky. The kind of oppressive summer heat that made every movement feel heavy and slow. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple blue sundress. Light makeup, hair pinned up. I wanted no distractions, no excuses. I arrived at the rented community center early, watching as the familiar faces trickled in, cousins, aunts, uncles, people who had always smiled at Sarah and barely nodded at me. I waited, and waited, and waited. Sarah was late. Of course she was. When she finally arrived, her smile was bright, her makeup flawless, her lie polished to a shine. And in that moment, I knew, she wasn't going to confess. She wasn't going to own any of it. She was going to let it all slide back into place, as if nothing had ever happened. And for the first time in my life, I felt nothing but pity for her. Because I didn't need her confession anymore. I didn't need her apology. I had already freed myself. As Sarah floated around the room, laughing, charming, lying as easily as breathing, I simply turned and walked out the door. I didn't make a scene. I didn't shout. I didn't even say goodbye. I just left. And outside, in the heavy, humid air, I took a deep breath and smiled. Because I finally understood. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their validation. I had survived without it. And I would thrive without it. The real twist wasn't Sarah's downfall. It was my freedom. In the days after I walked out of the reunion, I expected the fallout to come crashing down like a tidal wave. Angry phone calls, tearful messages, maybe even a full-blown family intervention. But the storm I was bracing for never arrived. Instead, there was only silence. At first, it felt surreal. Every time my phone buzzed, a part of me flinched, expecting the worst. But it was never them. It was coworkers, friends, spam calls, anything but the people who had once consumed every ounce of my energy. It was like they had wiped their hands clean of me the second I refused to play my part. And surprisingly, I was okay with that. The weight that had lived on my chest for years was gone. Replaced with something unfamiliar but intoxicating. Peace. Real, bone-deep peace. For the first time, I wasn't carrying the burden of proving my worth to people determined not to see it. I woke up every morning without dread curling in my stomach. I walked into work feeling lighter. I laughed more easily, breathed more deeply. Even the air felt different. Like the world had shifted slightly on its axis to finally make room for me. But life, as it tends to, had one final twist tucked up its sleeve. It happened about a month later. On a perfectly ordinary Wednesday afternoon. I was leaving school, arms full of lesson plans and art supplies, when I saw her, Sarah, standing by the curb, next to a beat-up old sedan that looked one bad day away from falling apart. She spotted me and straightened, smoothing her hair nervously. My gut clenched, but I forced myself to keep walking. Julia, she called out. Her voice shaky. I considered pretending I hadn't heard. Just slipping into my car and driving away. But something in her tone, raw, desperate, made me pause. Reluctantly, I turned. What do you want, Sarah? I asked. My voice calm, almost detached. She crossed the parking lot quickly, wringing her hands. I need to talk to you, she said. Please. I didn't move. I didn't invite her closer. I'm listening, I said. She looked around, as if hoping for privacy. But the truth was, I didn't care about her comfort anymore. I told them, she said, voice breaking. Mom and Dad. I told them everything. About the money. About the lies. All of it. I blinked, caught off guard despite myself. They didn't take it well. She continued, her eyes filling with tears. Mom won't even speak to me. Dad's furious. They're blaming me for everything now. For a split second, the old Julia stirred, the one who would have softened, would have stepped in to fix it. But I pushed her down. And? I asked, my voice even. Sarah's face crumpled. I don't know what to do. She whispered, I lost everything. Julia, my apartment, my car, my job. Mom and Dad want nothing to do with me. And she swallowed hard. I was hoping, maybe you could help me. Just for a little while. Until I get back on my feet. There it was. The real reason she was here. Not guilt. Not remorse. Need. I took a slow breath. Feeling the moment settle around us like thick fog. I'm sorry you're struggling, I said, and I meant it. On some level, I truly did. But pity wasn't the same as responsibility. I can't save you, Sarah, I said quietly. I spent too many years trying to save people who didn't want to be saved. I'm done with that. Her eyes widened, desperate. Julia, please, she choked out. You're my sister. I smiled sadly. I was your sister when you let me bleed for this family and said nothing. I said, I was your sister when you took credit for everything I sacrificed. Now, I'm someone who finally learned how to choose herself. Sarah staggered back like I had struck her. Tears streamed down her face. But I didn't move. I wasn't cruel. I was just finished. Without another word, I turned and walked away. My steps light, my heart steady. I didn't look back. Later that night, sitting on my tiny balcony with a glass of wine in hand, I thought about everything that had led to this moment. All the nights I cried myself to sleep wondering why I wasn't enough. All the times I swallowed my pride just to keep the peace. All the years I lived like a ghost in my own life. And now, I was free. Not because they had changed, but because I had. The real revenge wasn't watching Sarah fall apart. It wasn't hearing my parents finally see the truth. It was living my life without needing them anymore. It was waking up every morning and choosing myself. Fully, unapologetically, joyfully. As I leaned back, watching the stars blink awake in the velvet sky, I realized something even sweeter. The girl who used to break herself into pieces to make everyone else comfortable. She was gone, and in her place stood a woman who understood her own worth. A woman who didn't need to be chosen to know she mattered. I smiled to myself, a quiet, victorious smile. Let them say whatever they wanted. Let them rewrite the story in their heads. I knew the truth, and for once, that was more than enough.